for and for pollinators.
And then Fran. Okay, Elizabeth.
Hello, I'm Fran. I've volunteered with the RCD going back to the time when the signs were actually put in at the Ventura site of RCD. So on and off, I volunteer for Monarch restoration.
Then we'll go to Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Liz Guardado. I'm a professor at Cal Poly Pomona. I oversee a project in the Santa Clara Valley trying to understand the impact of native and non-crop vegetation on ecosystem services in agriculture. And I'm one of Carson's advisors.
Great. We'll go to Emma.
Hi, I'm also a master's student at Cal Poly Pomona. I work with birds in the Santa Clara River Valley, and I'm here to support Carson.
Then we got Juliana.
Hi everyone, my name is Juliana Perez. I'm representing the Santa Monica Mountains Fund with the Monarch Milkweed program, and I work on that with a really awesome coworker of mine named Nahi, who can't be here today, but it's awesome to be here. Thank you.
Great, and then we have Antonio. No, he was not. I think he put it in the chat.
Antonio can't use his mic.
Okay, perfect. So he's with the Santa Monica Mountains, Samo Fund, and then Nadia.
Not sure if Nadia, I know Nadia's there. She's also from the Santa Barbara's with me. She works directly with our conservation and science department, primarily working with everything from overwintering to community science projects like Monarch Counts and everything else in between.
Okay,
thanks, Trent. Sorry, it took me a minute to get to my mute, but thank you. That was it.
No worries. Thank you, guys. So today we have a few different presentations for you, focused a little bit more on pollinators on ag, and then pollinator habitats just in general. So we're going to start off with Tara Fay. She will be presenting on the Green Valley project, and I'll kind of hand it over to you, Tara.
Alrighty. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me see from the beginning. Oh goodness, sorry. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So hi again, everyone. My name is Tara. I'm the program director with Green Valley Project. I have been doing programs with Green Valley Project and the crew for about 5.5 years now. And I was one of the people to help get started our Green Valley Project Youth Council. Our Green Valley Project program really helps to engage young people in the Ventura County community. Our students are usually anywhere between 13 and 20, sometimes a little younger, sometimes a little older. And they work together to create solutions to environmental issues that they see in their communities. A lot of these environmental projects involve rain gardens, pollinator gardens, environmental education. Sometimes we also do a little bit of conservation work as well. So Green Valley Project is a program of the crew. We're located in Ventura County. We have programs in Ojai, Oxnard, Thousand Oaks. We also have some of our sessions in Carpinteria and Santa Barbara, but typically we're located in the Ventura County area. And our program is dedicated to fostering a love for the environment and empowering our local youth. We focus on youth leadership, environmental education, and habitat restoration type work. This top picture is us over at Santa Rosa Island, helping to work on some of their cloud forest restoration work, and it was pretty exciting to be a part of that. So some of the programs that we offer within Green Valley Project is to be a part of one of our environmental youth councils. These are Ojai, Thousand Oaks, and Oxnard, and that's really the one that's focused on environmental leadership and creating these community projects focused on the environmental issues that they see. We also have our PAX Environmental Science Institute, which is an 8-week educational and career development type program where kids can shadow different environmental professionals and see if environmental science is a career that they're interested in kind of going for in college. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. We also have a native plant nursery internship that we collaborate with Ojai Valley Land Conservancy to work on. And a lot of the plants for our educational pollinator gardens are actually from the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy nursery. So some of the different careers that the kids get to shadow when they are part of our PESI program, we have wildlife rehabilitation, we have field art, marine biology, botany, archaeology, native plant nursery management, birding, tribal resources. They really get a feel for all of these different environmental careers. They get to work one-on-one with environmental professionals, ask questions, get to see how these people kind of started their careers. And then also they get to learn about how they could potentially work in this field as an intern or a volunteer and kind of make those connections and get started with networking, which is really awesome. So if any of you are interested in helping out as one of our environmental career specialists, that's definitely something that I'm looking for. So definitely a cool opportunity there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about really briefly some of our past youth council projects. I'm just going to run through them and then I'm going to go a little bit more deeply into the pollinator habitat specific type projects that we have. So we did a Nordoff pollinator pathway installation project that took place last year. It took us 2 sessions, so that was a full year project, and that was about 16 weeks to complete. We did a rain garden barrel design project in Thousand Oaks, where the kids were able to work with Rain Barrel International to get these rain barrels donated, and then they kind of beautified the rain barrels and then sold them to local residents to try and get people to help conserve water in their yards. We also worked with the El Rio Boys and Girls Club to put a native plant garden in their space. We worked with the Ojai Raptor Center to create barn owl boxes that we were able to put at Nordoff High School to help with their gopher problem. And the gopher problem has definitely been an issue that we've been dealing with in some of the garden projects that we have at Nordoff, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. We also worked at Mesa, which is a housing development for transitional foster youth, and we put in a garden over there as well. We had an invasive species initiative where we helped to remove invasive species at Ventura Land Trust at on one of their trails. We have our Save the Pollinators project, which I will talk about a lot more soon. And then we have our Reoking Ojai project, which was our first ever youth council project that we worked on. So for Reoking Ojai, we started this in 2021, and we worked with Ojai Trees, who helped us by donating 50 coast live oak and valley oak trees. And we basically created brochures and we canvassed around our community and asked people if they would plant trees in their front yard. For this project, we were trying to increase pollinator habitat, but we were also trying to provide shade for our communities. So we used some GIS mapping tools, and we were able to kind of like pinpoint hotspots for areas that we wanted more trees. And then we went and canvassed those neighborhoods and asked people if we could plant trees. We were able to plant those 50 trees throughout Ojai Valley and Miners Oaks. And that was a really fun, successful first project for our Green Valley project teams. In 2022, we decided that we really enjoyed the pollinator aspect. We, had heard about the declining number of monarchs and decided that we wanted to create some sort of an environmental solution to that issue. So the kids created a pollinator corridor, which is a network of pollinator gardens that help to provide shade, food, and shelter for pollinators as they migrate through our county. For this pollinator corridor project, we ended up planting 4 educational community gardens, one at Topa Topa Elementary School, Topa Topa Preschool, the Ventura County Humane Society, and Mama Walnut Farm, which is now Mama Tree Farm. We ended up also creating a plant palette and then creating these pollinator plant kits where we had 10 different environmental we had 10 different pollinator friendly plants that the people could choose from. And then those went to about 50 homes. So that was 500 plants that got planted in people's yards. We also, so 500 plus the 204 educational community gardens, so we ended up planting a total of 700 California native plants in our community. And we created this really lovely pollinator corridor visual with the trees from our Ojai Trees project and all of the community gardens that ended up being a part of our pollinator corridor. Our next project was our Mesa Garden project in 2023. For this project, we actually removed their asphalt driveway, and then we added in a whole bunch of soil and mulch, and we added about 250 native plants to create a native plant garden and to create even more pollinator-friendly spaces for our pollinator corridor. And then in 2024, our kids worked on their largest project to date, where at Nordhoff High School, which is also located in Ojai, there is this really large kind of hillside on the backside of our campus. And the kids worked together with professionals from Watershed Progressive to kind of design what this pollinator corridor could look like. And they created 3 different designs, and then they ended up sending out those designs to the community so the community could vote for what they would like to see in this space, because it's highly, walked. A lot of the students are running by here on their track, and then a lot of community members walk their dogs, and it's connected really close to our Ojai Meadows Preserve, so it's definitely a well-hiked area. We were able to ask our community what design they preferred, and then we worked with our community in about 3 or 4 community planting events to plant 300 pollinator-friendly natives across the hillside. We had a really hot year, and we had gophers, lots and lots of gophers that wanted to eat through our drip irrigation. So we unfortunately had to replant about half of the natives again, remulch the area, and then add another 500 feet of polytubing for our drip irrigation system. But it's looking beautiful right now, so I'm happy at the progress that we have here. And then our most recent pollinator garden, rain garden type project that we have kind of going on in the Green Valley project world is our Ojai Valley Garden Ojai Valley School Upper Campus Garden. So they reached out to us and they asked us if we would be interested in converting this disturbed space that's located right behind their horse stables and over a stream. The area was, when I first saw it, just completely covered in weeds, very, very tall weeds all the way up to my head. And there was a lot of issues with erosion. The soil was either super, super packed or it was just falling apart. So we really wanted to, if we took on this space, have a little bit of a deeper reflection on how we could work with the soil to help improve the texture and help to actually make these plants happy. So we worked again with Watershed Progressive, and our youth council team worked to design an educational garden. We worked to test the soil and see how porous it was. We removed a lot of the invasive weeds. Here are some of our kids holding some tree tobacco that we saw in the back. And we created a plant palette. We used some Google aerial images to map out our design. We measured the dimensions of the garden, and this was going to be a really large rain garden project for us. Our goal with this rain garden was to help the water to kind of go downhill and then collect at the base of the garden and then kind of spread and sink evenly into the soil to help all of the plants get an even amount of water. So we ended up, after our initial planning, we hosted 3 community planting events. We planted 185 native plants. And then we worked to add in some mulch, some drip irrigation, and in about 2 years, these plants will have established root systems and will no longer need the irrigation. So it's a really great way for the kids to kind of see how they can help to, first of all, create pollinator habitat, but also help to conserve water and help to create some more natural habitat. Just like you can kind of see in the background, we're just kind of increasing some of that natural habitat in this educational garden. So this is kind of a before and after of how this garden project is looking right now. We're still working on it. We still plan to install some educational signs in the garden. We're going to be adding in a stepstone pathway with prints from native animals that have been seen around the garden and on campus. One of them is going to be a little bear paw that we got. So that's pretty exciting. Okay. And then every year we're also focusing on making sure that we have educational signage at all of our gardens and then hosting maintenance events so that we can make sure that these gardens are thriving and surviving. And we basically want these gardens to establish before we stop having those maintenance events. So here are some of our impacts and achievements. We've planted over 4,000 native plants and oak trees for our community. We've trained over 300 youth in environmental leadership, and we've had a lot of really amazing success stories with our young people in our programs. We have 12 completed community service projects across Ventura County. And we collaborate with a lot of community partners to make these types of projects a reality. So if you guys would like to become involved or have any ideas, I would love to hear your ideas. Here's kind of my call to action for all of you. If you are interested in Green Valley Project, if you would like to be involved in some of our upcoming events and support the young people that are doing these types of garden projects in Ojai, Oxnard, and Thousand Oaks, definitely join our newsletter. If you send me an email after this, I can get you signed up. If you know any young people, I would love it if you could encourage them to apply. Our next youth council cohort is going to be in spring 2026, and we're going to also include a Ventura youth council as well, so we'll have 4 youth councils to choose from. Another thing that would be amazing is if you'd like to volunteer as a mentor or somebody to be a part of our PESI program so that kids can shadow your career. Also, if you have any funding opportunities that would help us to sustain and grow our program, And it's always helpful to have some additional funding. Cool. So other than that, I do have a video, but I'm not sure if I have enough time for the video. What do y'all think?
And so I think if you want to share it real quick, we'll have plenty.
Yeah? At the end of the meeting or right now?
Right now is fine. We have some extra
We'll do
time.
questions later. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
This is actually, I think Antonio Sanchez is here. His band is Sage Against the Machine. Or sorry, yeah, Sage Against the Machine, that's it. And he collaborated with his band and our kids to create this pollinator song. And I thought that we could share that music video with you all now. So let me go ahead and get that geared up here. Okay. And then let me know if you guys can hear or not too. Okay.
we can't hear anything if there's supposed to be.
Uh-oh. Can you hear now?
No.
No.
Ah, shoot. Okay.
Can you
I'm not
Yeah, if you
I'm
want
not sure how to do that.
chat, then people can watch it on their time, or we can try and play it at the end.
Okay. I'll send it in the chat.
Perfect.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, it's just the video. If you scroll down on that page, it's the video at the bottom. But it's just a nice, fun way for our kids to kind of communicate, you know, like in a different way, in an artistic way, how much they care about the environment and how much they care about pollinators and creating a better future. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for letting me share.
Great. Thank you so much, Tara, for sharing about the Green Valley project. Does anyone have any questions for her right now, or we can always hold them to the end, or you can drop them in the chat. Okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and move on. And if anyone has any questions, if they think about any, you can put them in the chat. We can come back to them at the end. Right. So I'll have you stop sharing your screen, Tara, and then we can have Carson go ahead and share hers. So next up we have Carson, and she is going to be presenting on the research she does on pollinators and hedgerows on ag land.
Let me get my screen set up for you guys.
Okay.
All right, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so hi everybody. My name is Carson Loudermelt. I am a second-year master's student from Cal Poly Pomona, working on a large project in the Santa Clara River Valley. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my research project looking at local and landscape features of orchards that influence wild bee communities within agriculture. So I just wanted to start by kind of explaining the larger project that I'm a part of. So we have a large project that's been going on for about 3 years within the Santa Clara River Valley. I will explain more about what makes this region special in a little bit later. But we have many professors and graduate students and undergraduate students working on different components of this project. But it is all centered around how different local and landscape composition and features of this agricultural area are impacting different wildlife communities. So we have people working on birds, insect, pest, and beneficials, bats, mammals, plants, including our hedgerows. And then we're also looking at our bees, which I am looking at. So we have a wide range of experts looking at different taxa, and we are all in close collaboration. But today I'm going to be talking to you about my project looking at our bee communities within this area. So just to start off with some background information about our pollinators. So it's well established that human land shade use is impacting biodiversity worldwide. So it's been shown time and time again that insect species are concerningly declining, with many of these papers attributing this decline to their natural habitats being converted to agriculture and pesticide use. So we know that agriculture is reshaping insect biodiversity worldwide. So one of our most important pollinator groups, which are bees, are no exception to this. This map here is showing you a study out of the University of Vermont, where they took expert opinion on suitable habitat for bees and modeled expected mean of bee abundance across the country. So this yellow here is the lower expected mean abundance. And then this map is showing you land that is being used for agriculture in 2020. You can see how closely that these align, highlighting the impact that agriculture is having on our bee communities nationwide. We also know that bee diversity is declining at a concerning rate. California is a bee biodiversity hotspot. We currently have 1,600 wild bee species that are native, more than any other state in the US. And today, over a third of those are at risk of going extinct. This is concerning, of course, because bees are a huge part of providing one of the most essential ecosystem services to us, which is pollination. It is estimated that 78% of the world's flowering plants depend on pollinators. We know that insect pollinators are responsible for pollinating over a third of our food crops, of course, making their economic value significant, valuing at over $170 billion a year globally. But not only is the presence of pollinators important, but also having a diverse community of pollinators has been shown to be important. So diverse communities have been shown to provide more efficient and reliable pollination services compared to homogenized groups of honeybees. In fact, when wild pollinators are present, this study here showed that avocado yield can increase by over 25%. And we also know that the presence of wild bees buffers against harmful environmental change to these communities. So therefore, there's been a lot of widespread effort to make agricultural fields more attractive to diverse pollinator communities. One way that is getting a lot of attention is increasing local vegetation in and around fields. So this is a hedgerow here, or a native small-scale planting along the edge of an orchard or a cropland, as many of you are probably aware. There's been a lot of work showing how these hedgerows are impacting wild bee communities, including that uncommon species of bees were found to be 7 times more abundant on hedgerow flowers than on weedy edges. We also know that they act as exporters of native bees into adjacent fields. And we also know that native bees respond positively to local patches of floral resources, including these hedgerows. So we also know that these communities might depend on the larger landscape vegetation. We know that vegetation increases species diversity and abundance. A study found that mean richness of wild bees within agriculture is significantly lower when the surrounding landscape is highly cultivated. We've also seen that landscapes with continuous floral resources are more suitable for bees like our bumblebees. But a lot of these studies that I just showed you are based on species diversity, but there's some limitations to using just species diversity. It treats all individuals as functionally identical and doesn't account for the diverse roles and functions a species might play in an ecosystem. So this is why in this project we are using something called functional diversity along with our species diversity, which focuses on characteristics that influence their roles in an ecosystem functioning, providing insights that just looking at our different species richness alone might overlook. So to look at functional diversity of an ecosystem, we use something called functional traits, which are just characteristics of a species that directly influence the way they interact with their environment. This includes characteristics like, for bees, like body size, tongue length, and nesting biology. So what is functional diversity? So to demonstrate this, let's look at 2 different bee communities. So each color here represents a different species. So community 1 to the left has 4 species, but then, so community 1 has 4 species, but they all, let's say, have very similar functional traits. In this case, they're all the same body size, let's say. And then community 2 to the right only has 3 species, but they have a large range of functional traits. Here they all have different body sizes. So community 1 is more taxonomically diverse, but less functionally diverse. Community 2, while it is less taxonomically diverse or species diverse,
it is more functionally diverse, so it has a wider range of roles played in the environment. So why does having a functionally diverse community matter? So more functionally diverse communities have been shown to be more resilient to disturbances. As an example, let's look back at our communities. We have community 1 again with our 4 species, but all 4 species, let's say these all happen to nest in the ground. And then we have community 2 still with our 3 different species, but let's say these have a wide range of nesting. So some nest in the ground, some nest in trees, etc. Now let's say the growers on this field have to make the decision to till their ground multiple times, and unfortunately all of our ground nesting species don't make it. So on the left, our community doesn't make it, but in community 2, we still have other pollinators and pollination continues. So
dress to take on vacation, especially if you're going somewhere warmer. I would wear it for a date.
Is there someone talking? Sorry.
Let me make sure everyone's
Okay. I wanted to make sure it wasn't a question or anything. I'll just keep going. So communities with more diverse functions are better at adapting to change. So we know that simplified agricultural environments are leading to communities low in functional diversity. We see generalists replacing specialists, such as honeybees, which we have seen is not necessarily beneficial or efficient to reliable pollination services on our croplands. But similar to taxonomic diversity, studies have shown that increasing local vegetation, such as adding a hedgerow, increases functional diversity of our wild bees. However, much less is known about how the broader landscape composition is impacting functional diversity, and if there is an interactive effect of local unlandscape characteristics. So we have limited insight into how these interactions influence our functional diversity, which hinders our ability to make effective applicable recommendations to our growers to support not just more bees, but a more functionally diverse and resilient community. So the objectives of my research project is to first look at species diversity, species abundance, and functional diversity of wild bees within our orchards. Secondly, to evaluate how local and landscape scale characteristics are influencing this species and functional diversity. And finally, to provide applicable recommendations to growers on how to protect wild bee communities, both in terms of taxonomy and function. So to do this, we are sampling pollinators within avocado and lemon orchards in the Santa Clara River Valley, as I mentioned earlier. This is also known as the Utah River Valley. So orchards in this area vary in vegetation composition and structure, and the landscape is highly heterogeneous with a lot of riparian vegetation and urbanized areas as well. So this offers us a unique opportunity to assess how different vegetation arrangements and compositions impact wild bee communities within other similar systems. So this is a map just showing you where our sites are located within the Santa Clara River Valley. We have 8 avocado, 8 lemon, and 4 riparian sites. And each of these sites, we have a 150-meter transect. So let's zoom in on that. So each transect has 3 sampling locations, one at the margin of the orchard, or 0 meters, one at 75 meters into the interior, and one at 150 meters into the interior. This allows us to explore if there's pollinator spillover into the interior of our orchards, which of course growers care about because we want them pollinating to the interior of our orchards, not just around the edges. So for the setup of our sites, we have 4 riparian sites that are 150-meter transects along some riparian vegetation. We have 8 orchard sites that are near larger vegetation. Half of those have hedgerows on their margins and half of them are bare. And then we have 8 orchards that are distant to riparian vegetation. And similarly here, we have half of those as bare and half of those as hedgerows. So this allows us to see how different communities are different between these combinations of vegetation at the local and landscape scales. So at each sampling point, we have pollinator traps. We have blue vein traps. These target our bees. We also have white and yellow pan traps. You can see kind of in this picture on the floor there, on the ground. Those are to target our flies and wasps some. We collect those and hopefully we'll be using those for future studies. So these samples are collected and taken back to the lab, where we spend many, many hours using keys to identify them to species, or as close as we can get. So at each of our survey points, we are also recording a floral species and then taking approximate abundance of that species in a 25-meter diameter or 25-meter buffer around each survey point. So we can see how floral abundance and diversity impacts our communities where we sample our bees. So to look at our broader landscape impact, we used California Wiretype 2022 land cover data set from CAL FIRE and ArcGIS Pro, and we just calculated the percent of cultivation and also Shannon land diversity, which is just a diversity metric of different types of land. And we did this in 100, 250, 500, and 1,000-meter buffer around each of our survey points. So some functional traits that I mentioned earlier that we're going to be including in our analysis is body size, which impacts foraging distances, pollination efficiency, resource needs. This trait was actually measured directly from our bee collection that we collected by measuring ITD, as you can see here between these. For flight range, which impacts a bee's ability to utilize distant resources. We also did tongue length, which influences floral specialization. This was also measured directly from our samples. This weird alien-like thing that you see on the right is a bee tongue from our collection. It's a Diadasia tongue. We have diet breath, which influences resiliency to disturbances and habitat preferences. And nesting biology, which influences habitat requirements and resilience to disturbances. Those are both from various literature sources. And finally, we're looking at flight phenology, which influences timing and synchronization with floral resources. We got this from looking at various local observations, so first and last flight of these bee species. So on to some of our preliminary findings from this. So after 7 surveys or 7 sampling rounds, we've collected about 6,500 individuals belonging to about 85 different species, which is a lot. You can see why we spend so many hours pinning them and identifying them. But here are some of the most common native species we found. So on the far left is our ultra-green sweat bee, or the Agaposterium texanus. We have a subspecies of small sweat bee, the Lasioglossum dialictus, and on the right we have a lot of this small carpenter bee, Ceratina acantha. So on to some of our actual data. So here on the x-axis, we are looking at habitat, so our avocado, lemon, and riparian sites. And then on the y-axis, we have our species richness per transect. So we see that our riparian sampling points were significantly higher in species richness, followed by our avocado and our lemon habitats. Though between our avocado and lemon habitats, there was not a significant difference. So we found that the best predictors of bee species richness was our local factors, so floral resources and Shannon landscape diversity within 100-meter buffers were our best predictors. So you can see here on the left, we have floral resources or floral richness on the x-axis, and then we have species richness on the y-axis, bee species richness on the y-axis. So you can see as floral richness increases, we have a significant increase in bee species richness as well. Similarly here on the right, on the x-axis now we have Shannon landscape diversity around 100 meters of our survey points, and then we still have bee species richness on the y-axis. You see as our landscape diversity increases, we see more bee species, so higher species richness. And then to our trait richness, so the functional diversity that we talked about, we find that the best predictor of functional diversity of our bee communities was just floral resources. So we see on the x-axis, as our floral resources increase, our functional richness also increases significantly. So after exploring how our environmental factors influence species and taxonomic diversity, we wanted to see how there's differences between our communities. So to explore differences among our communities, I ran something called an NMDS ordination. So don't worry about what the axes mean here. What matters is the distance between points. Each point represents a survey site, and points farther apart are more compositionally different from each other. So this riparian point is very compositionally different in terms of what species are there and how much is there than this lemon point over here, for example. So running a statistical model, and you can see visually that our lemon orchard communities look like they're significantly different in community composition from our avocado and our riparian sites, but similar between our avocado and riparian sites. But we see kind of a different story now looking at our functional composition, so what different functions our bee communities are playing. So with this, we are looking at the same graph, but now at the abundance-weighted functional composition of our communities. We see some separation between our riparian and lemon and avocado and lemon communities, but you can see that there is much more overlap than our community composition from the last slide, possibly indicating that while our community assemblage is different between our crop types and our habitat types, functional composition might be more retained across habitat types. So big picture summary here, we see that floral resources and landscape diversity support a broader range of bee species and traits. We see that bee communities differ between crop types, but their roles might be conserved between habitat types. We see cultivation intensity and floral availability are key environmental drivers of community and functional composition. And our next step is to process the rest of our bees that we've collected and get their functional traits from those. So I wanted to thank all of my advisors and collaborators, as well as all of my lab members. I wanted to acknowledge that we are working on the land, the traditional land of the Chumash people. Of course, the growers that allow us to do all their work, all of our work within their orchards, and all of our funding sources from ARI, Utom Conservation Fund, and the California Avocado Commission. And I put my email here if anyone has questions that they'd like to ask privately. Feel free to email me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carson. Does anyone have any questions for her at the moment?
I do actually. Thanks so much, Carson. I'm Vivon from the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy. That was a really awesome presentation and really cool research findings. My question for you is about those riparian sites that you were kind of looking at as kind of as another comparison. And it seems like you were kind of using some pretty high level vegetation data for looking at those, maybe like some of the CAL FIRE data and some NDVI stuff. Were you looking at like the species of plants that are within those riparian zones? Because I mean, when you think about the Santa Clara River, you're just thinking hundreds and hundreds of acres of arundo, right? And in my mind, that's just like another monoculture. Maybe it's not a productive one like an orchard, but it's still monoculture. So I'm wondering, like, did that factor into it, or maybe like is part of your discussion on those findings of the overlap and functional diversity?
Yeah, for sure. So with here, I'll go back to this slide. With our landscape GIS stuff, we didn't look at specific species, but it was more like what's the diversity of land around, regardless of like vegetation species. That is something that I am really thinking about because we do have like on our riparian sites here, we do have data that looks at specific vegetation and specific what plants are there. I have seen a lot that like bees don't care if they're native or non-native with different flower types. So I think that's a really interesting question. But yeah, it'll definitely be part of my discussion. We haven't put it into any of our models yet, but yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Well, it looks like Adam Lambert is one of your advisors, so I'm sure he'll have lots of thoughts and opinions to give you on that exact question. But yeah, but at least kind of from the way that I kind of perceive and look at a really basic level, sometimes you're looking at essentially a monoculture of arundo. And so when, that functional diversity might seem like it's pretty overlapping, but then you're seeing a bit of a difference in the species diversity or something. Those were some graphs you had at the end. I feel like, maybe that has something to do with pesticide use or something like that. And so I'd be interested to I'd love to have you come back to a later one when you've got your discussion findings, or, reach out. I can give my email in the chat. One of our interns is actually looking into kind of farmers' perceptions of in like utilizing pollinator corridors on their orchards here in Ojai. And so I think your research would be really interesting to our intern. She comes from an ag background and her family's all farmers. So, and she loves native plants. So, that would just be really interesting to kind of look into. So thank you so
Yeah, of
much.
course. Yeah, I will say two of our riparian sites are at CSCR, if you're familiar with that, which they're like a restored riparian habitat. So hopefully it's not as many like monocultures of that, but yeah, definitely something to consider.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carson.
Yeah.
And then it looks like we have a question from Julie Clark in the chat. How do growers manage the vegetation in the plots?
Yeah, so we have our different growers that have hedgerows. It's actually our hedgerows, so we have like experimental hedgerows at the sites that have these. So we actually manage it. We have a student on it that comes out and weeds it and helped it establish. So
very cool. And then we had a couple questions here as well. One of them, what's your protocol of handling the bees, and how does like that trapping kind of work?
yeah, so when they go into, so each of these bowls here and this blue vein trap in the back, they have some water in the bottom and we put a little bit of soap in it. So they just like sink to the bottom. So it's kind of like a non-toxic way of uh, getting them in there, and then we'll put them in vials and bring them back to the lab and pin them.
Interesting. And then are the plots that are in the where like the lemons and avocados are they typically like in this picture bare soil or mulch, or they're like cover crops on them, and how does that like kind of change that data?
Yeah, for sure. So this is an avocado site that you're seeing right here. A lot of them will have these like rows where there's kind of some like bare mulch. But some sites have like complete leaf litter, especially on our avocado sites on the ground. And then our lemon sites are much more open. They have more like an open canopy with more soil. So one of our next steps is actually to go out and see what percentage of the ground around our survey points do have bare soil or bare mulch, because we know a lot of the species, I'd say like 80% of the species that we found do nest in the ground and they need that that habitat. So we're interested to see how just having like the bare mulch and the bare ground is impacting the data.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much. If anyone has any further questions for Carson, go ahead and either reach out to her via email that she put on her presentation. And if you want to drop your email in the chat to Carson, then people can reach out to you that way, or they can ask the questions in the chat and we can go over it later at the end of the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
So then we'll move on to our last presentation, and I'm gonna pass this off over to my coworkers. One on the right. Oh. Can everyone see that? Yes, okay, cool. Okay. Thanks everyone for having Cristina and I and our co-collaborator Sarah here today to present on the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Pollinator Habitat Program. This is a block grant that was awarded to 9 organizations across the state of California. And in our area, Cachuma Resource Conservation District was awarded the PHP funds. Their task is to help farmers and ranchers in their service area to install habitat and implement management practices that support pollinators. So Cachuma RCD is contracted with Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, Community Environmental Council, and Ventura County RCD to help farmers with this grant. So there's a few of us here representing this collaborative effort. And so from the Ventura County RCDs, myself, Emily, and Cristina. And we've been offering application assistance to farmers and integrated pest management trainings for program awardees. And then Sarah, who's also on the call, she's from the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, and she's been offering technical assistance to farmers on plant selection and pollinator monitoring. And so Carson did a good job of introducing, the benefits of pollinators, bees specifically, and this habitat. But California, the CDFA, they recognize that the pollinator populations are in decline due to various factors, habitat destruction, pesticide use, disease, climate change. They also recognize that pollinators play a critical role in the productivity of many agricultural crops, and so ag lands can play a really important role here. So CDFA launched the Pollinator Habitat Program to financially assist in the establishment of pollinator habitat across agricultural lands in California, with the goal of promoting biodiversity, strengthening pollinator populations, supporting integrated pest management, and improving agricultural productivity. And so over the last 2 years, our group has worked with farmers across Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo counties to help farmers join the program and implement different types of pollinator habitat on their farms and ranches. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the projects that are under this block grant recipient pollinator habitat program. And so this is a map of all the individual farms that are participating in this program and received funding. So this spans from as north as SLO County to as south as Ventura County. And as all the presenters have mentioned before, we really want to try and explore how we can increase this pollinator habitat corridor. And since there are a lot of productive agricultural land in this area, we really want to utilize that ag land to include more pollinator habitat. So we're starting to see the formation of this corridor, but it's definitely something we hope that continues to grow. So in terms of this project, some quick statistics are there are 22 total farms participating at the moment. About 66% of the awarded farmers are female. About 30% of the farmers are socially disadvantaged farmers or ranchers, which has an official definition below from CDFA. And there's a diverse range of crops, which include citrus like lemons and oranges, avocados, wine grapes from vineyards, passion fruit, agave, row crops and vegetables, livestock, horses, nursery plants, honey, olives, apples, herbs, cut flowers, pomegranate, and lavender. So I wanted to highlight some of these farmers that are actually doing the work. So this first farm, Garden Celebrations, is a smaller, diversified farm. It's 8.5 acres based in Ojai. Their crops include herbs, cut flowers, olives, pomegranates, and various fruits in their orchard. Their goal is basically to increase plant diversity to help increase the insect diversity on their farm. So the project that they decided to do was to install 2,806 feet of hedgerow planting. Additionally, 0.77 acres of cover crop, about a 1/4 acre of wildlife habitat planting, and 0.8 acres, which comes out to about 120 plants of tree and shrub establishment on their farm. You can see in the farmer's goals, this farmer is really passionate about protecting pollinators, and they mention a lot of really interesting observations, such as the crotch's bumblebee on their farm, and then also that they're really interested in removing drought-tolerant but non-native inflammable trees, such as the California pepper tree and eucalyptus, and replacing them with more appropriate trees and shrubs, which they're able to do in this project. So the program started, and farmers are sending in photos as part of their requirements. A lot of them have just started planting, so these photos are still in the early stages. So this is the hedgerow shortly after planting. These plants are pretty small, and irrigation for establishment is one of the requirements in this grant. So you see the irrigation lines with small little plants that will grow to be about 15 feet in width, and hopefully a high rate of survivorship. This is their cover crop. I wanted to explain that cover crop is a seasonal planting that are annuals, and they are grown and then terminated often within the same year. This is some of their wildlife habitat, which will grow up. You can see some of these species. And you can see all these tree and shrub cover plants dispersed throughout their land. A slightly larger farm that is in this program is Hope Family Farms. They're a 43-acre farm in Paso Robles growing wine grapes. They're excited about supporting the ecosystem of their property and their agriculture, and they want to integrate all these practices of cover crops, pollinator habitat, and wildlife habitat. So they're planting 0.36 acres of conservation cover, 466 linear feet of hedgerow planting, and then 5.2 acres of wildlife habitat planting, which comes out to about 780 diverse shrubs. Some of you might be interested in the species that are going into these plantings. So for this farm specifically, these are their species breakdown. Give you all a second to look at them. These are all native plants for the most part. In this program, the farmers are able to choose their plants with recommendations and advising from all the collaborators, including the Botanic Garden. So this is the farmer's conservation cover in their vineyard. As opposed to cover crop, conservation cover is a permanent vegetative ground cover using perennial plants. So the last farm I wanted to highlight is Limonera, which is a much larger farm than the others, over 2,000 acres in Santa Paula. Their crops are lemons and avocados. The farmers' goals are to increase biodiversity and pollination in their fields, improve the health of their soils, and they're really interested in adding pollinator habitat to improve avocado pollination. So their project was 160 acres of conservation cover, which is as I mentioned, permanent ground cover. So this is some of their conservation cover in their rows of the orchard, looking really good in these photos. Also using a diverse pollinator species mix. So one of the RCD's role in this grant was to lead integrated pest management trainings, which are required for the PHP contracted growers. Integrated pest management is basically explaining how to manage pests in a sustainable way that is going to reduce pesticide usage, which will reduce pesticide resistance, and also protect our pollinators, protect the plantings that they just did on their farms, so they're not immediately using chemical controls and eliminating the pollinators. So integrated pest management uses biological, cultural, physical, and chemical controls to sustainably manage pests. These trainings were really exciting and I think great for us to share resources with farmers, but also for farmers who are part of this program and really excited about pollinators to share resources with each other, share ways they trap their gophers, ways to, you know, increase certain pollinators, and I think it was overall a really positive experience for a lot of the farmers. So we shared additional IPM resources with the farmers, and on the right on the QR code is a ongoing website that I'm updating with just links for IPM resources that the farmers have access to. So if anybody has any additional resources and links, feel free to email them to me and I will add them to this resource.
We're going to hand it off to Sarah, talking about monitoring sites and the pollinators that we're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Cristina. My name is Sarah Cusser. I'm one of the terrestrial invertebrate conservation ecologists at the Botanic Garden. It's a mouthful. I'm one of the bug people. And I've been so happy to get to participate in this project, both recommending plants that meet some of the goals needed for the pollinator habitat project, but also trying to help train folks to monitor the relative success of their projects. And I thought I would talk a little bit about that now. So we asked anyone who participated in this grant to monitor in two ways. First, with photo points, some of which were shown in the previous slides from Cristina. So they're all pretty little plants right now, but it's exciting seeing them getting started. And that was really just to assess the survivorship and the success rate of this newly installed habitat. Did they get the plants in? Did they survive? And they'll be required to monitor that for 3 years, which will be great information about the relative success. And then the second method that we were training them to do was transect monitoring. And our goal was really to measure the pollinator abundance and diversity in this newly established habitat. And this is something that we practiced at our 2 in-person trainings, which was super fun. And the transect is just 100 feet long linear line that you put out, and then you very slowly walk and you record every pollinator that you see interacting with a flower along that transect. And we ask them to do that once a year, just to get an idea of, are bugs coming back to these flowers that we've planted? Is this relatively successful? Are we providing habitat? And so it's a very meditative and peaceful 10-minute walk. I don't know if anyone has tried to walk 100 feet in 10 minutes. It's slower than you would think. So we practice that as a team. Could you move to the next slide? Thanks, Cristina. And because we don't expect our landowners, farmers, ranchers to be entomological experts, we had them kind of group their floral visiting insects into really 7 very coarse groups. And this follows the same protocol that they use at UC Berkeley and through the Xerces protocol. And as mentioned before, bees, so the first 3 groups, honeybees, solitary bees, and bumblebees, are considered some of the very best pollinators, but they are not the only pollinators. We also have wasps, which are also in that order, Hymenoptera, butterflies and moths, flies and beetles. And then I'm really quickly just going to go through some of the diagnostic characteristics to tell these major groups apart. So if you could go to the next slide, Cristina. Honeybees. And I should say this is all available either on the IPM website or as a PDF if anyone wants copies of these resources. But this is the information that we gave to land managers so that they can execute these monitoring surveys and kind of get some consistency between groups over time. So our first group that we wanted them to be able to identify is the non-native honeybee. So the non-native honeybee is from Europe. It's not from North America. It's feral here in North America, but it's also managed in hives. And the very best way to tell them apart is they have flat hind legs. So they have corbicula or pollen baskets and hairy eyes, rather than most of our solitary native bees that have hairy legs. Could you go to the next slide? Solitary bees are some of our most important pollinators, and we have around 14 to 1600 different species here in Central California. So that one non-native honeybee species versus 1600 solitary species. And these are super diverse. And all I really want to impress upon you is how diverse they are. They range in size from a couple millimeters long, like this tiny carpenter bee, all the way up to a large xylocopa or large carpenter bee. And they vary from like a dull metallic to a bright green to having fluffy tummies or fluffy legs. They're super dynamic and super diverse. And so we were hoping that the farmers would just be able to coarsely bin honeybees, our non-native bees, and then our solitary bees. And then next slide. And these are more solitary bees. So some of them have really long antennae and then this racing green stripes. Our third group were bumblebees. So we were really interested in farmers being able to distinguish if they had bumblebees visiting their newly planted plants. And a lot of people are pretty familiar with bumblebees. They're fluffy. They also have that corbicula that honeybees do. They're in the same family, but they're pretty easily distinguished from a honeybee. So, and next slide. Then we have our wasps and our beetles. So wasps are very similar to bees. They're in the same order, but instead of being vegan mothers that feed their children pollen to develop, they actually feed, for the most part, they feed their children, their little baby larvae, meat. So they'll feed them other bugs that they've collected and things like that. So that's a major difference between the two groups. And you can tell them apart because they generally are much less fluffy. They have long, thin wings and a long, thin waist. They kind of just look sleeker, more like a, evil character in a book. Beetles have these hardened front wings called elytra and tend to have clubbed antennae. And that was the fifth group that we were having them group things into. If you could go to the next slide. Butterflies and moths were just a single group, and we were hoping for them to count up the number of butterflies and moths that they saw on their plants. Next slide. And then I believe this is our last group, flies. So the Diptera have two wings, and they're generally easier to tell apart by their giant eyes, very short antennae, and they only have a single set of wings. So one wing on the left and one wing on the right, which can be hard to see. But generally, the eyes are a pretty good giveaway. So next slide. And so this was really fun that we got to actually train all of the people participating in the grant on exactly how to execute these monitorings and give them a little taste of the diversity of all the awesome bugs that could be visiting their flowers in the future, and generally just get people excited about the transformation that they were about to behold on their property. And farmers are required to do this for 3 years following implementation, and they are uploading both the photos and then the monitoring that they're doing of their transects onto a Google Doc that will go straight to the CDFA to help determine whether this was successful. So we have no results just yet, but I can say the 2 in-person trainings and the online training were super fun. And so that's all I have the results for now. Good times were had. And I think I'll pass it back to Emily.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so to recap, we've had our share of successes and challenges along the way in this program so far. We're seeing a lot of enthusiasm for an implementation of pollinator habitats on ag lands in this grant and in some of our other grants as well. The map from earlier, it's really cool to see the beginnings of a pollinator corridor on ag lands. And if we were to add our other grants in there and then adding all the efforts from the other organizations in there, I'm sure that corridor would be extremely pronounced. Some challenges. Our farmers have found it challenging to source some of the desired native plants in bulk. So if you have some suggestions, affordable suggestions, we'll take those. Also, farmers are really busy, and as much as they're excited for this work, it's not always their top priority to implement and maintain this planting over their cash crop. And then there's been some limitations and challenges specific to the grant itself, but this is state funding, which comes with those limitations. But if it was maybe a private funding source, we wouldn't necessarily have all those same challenges. Just looking to the future, like Sarah said, that monitoring data is being collected for CDFA's use, like hopefully answering what pollinators are we seeing, what practices are most effective for establishing more pollinator or stronger, larger pollinator populations. Was this program generally successful? Should they fund it again? One thing, like once this grant ends, the farmers are like on their own, and plant survivorship and practice maintenance is on them. So beyond the grant term, that's something we hope that the farmers will keep up, but it's hard. It can be challenging in a tough financial year. Also, another consideration is managing these pollinator plantings for fire preparedness. That's a topic of conversation that's come up a lot more recently in the last 6 months than a year and a half ago. And right now, CDFA does not currently have funds for another round of the pollinator habitat program. We know most of the farmers can't do this without financial assistance. So I guess I'm kind of opening this up to the larger crowd. How do we continue to fund this work on ag lands if grant funding is inconsistent? So I'm opening that up for yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Emily, Christina, and Sarah. We do have a question in the chat from Yvette. Are farmers required to be organic, and do they spray?
They're not required to be organic. Many of the farms are certified organic or not certified but practicing organic. And for those who aren't organic or practicing organic, spraying is like the last option, but they're not spraying. Like the point of the IPM trainings is to make sure that we're on board with not spraying the pollinator habitat that we're planting, but also considering all the alternative options before we get to spraying. But at the end of the day, we can't tell the farmer exactly what to do, but it is their own operation and they have to be able to make a living off of it. So we try our best to give them all the alternatives possible, but they're not organic, not all of them.
Gotcha. Marilyn says, has there been any coordination with the Xerces Society about habitat kit programs? They offer hedgerow kits with each year of funding. So they have a program that gives plants out.
Yeah, our kind of co-collaborators who aren't here today, Community Environmental Council, I'm pretty sure they've been connecting farmers with the Xerces program, but I just can't recall, but I'll ask.
And then I had a question for you guys. Do they have to, when they implement a hedgerow or something, do they have to have a certain number of species on their hedgerow to kind of create some sort of diversity, or can it be a simple like 2 plant palette?
It has to be like CDFA shows a minimum of 5 different species of plants. And then but if it's a windrow planting, which we didn't have any examples here, then the purpose of a windrow is also to block the wind. So like consistency in species is important. So whereas the hedgerow, you want that diversity, like the purpose of the hedgerow is actually for the diversity, not for like blocking wind. So in this case, like CDFA requires 5, but most farmers do a lot more than that.
Sure, cool. Does anyone else have any questions for the group?
I do, yeah. Thanks so much. That was a really interesting presentation. I was wondering if you guys have had any like concerns or questions from farmers about like potential conflicts with SIGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and their groundwater sustainability agencies. You know, ultimately, if you're planting these plants on your land and trees, especially, you know, they are obviously lower water being native, but they still require water to kind of get them established, right? And with Sigma in place, you know, they're trying to cut back on water use. Do you guys notice any kind of conflicts with that or people mentioning concerns?
I haven't had any farmers mention like any serious concerns about water consumption. We are trying to select low or drought tolerant and native species, like you said, plants that aren't requiring too much watering and plants that once established don't need any more like extra added water. Yeah, I haven't personally heard too much from farmers about that concern in particular, but in general, outside of this program, like yes, farmers are totally concerned with how much water they're using and how expensive it is. Some of these farmers like have, and maybe if they have their own well, I mean, they still have this segment to consider. But they're not competing with like a schedule for watering, or if they kind of have some more flexibility in their watering, then it's kind of easier to implement these types of practices. Or if they're doing like conservation cover crop, they're implementing it right before the rainy season, so they just are taking advantage of what nature is already providing and not adding any more. They're not paying to water for establishment in those pieces.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, well, one thing that got me thinking about is there's an organization called Sustainable Conservation, and they've worked with some groundwater sustainability agencies in the Central Valley that oftentimes like the monitoring of water use is at a really high scale, like a really high scale. So they might be using satellite imagery, looking at NDVI, which is basically just greenness. And so you see a lot of more green when you have cover crops and you have hedgerows. And so their concerns are about like increasing their rates based on that kind of metric. But they've actually implemented a really interesting, cool thing where if you can actually verify, i.e. you guys are doing a lot of monitoring and verification, they can actually verify that they are doing cover cropping, they are doing native plantings that are having other multiple benefits to the whole ag system. Then they might actually be able to receive like a credit to their fees that they're typically paying to the GSAs. So it could be an interesting kind of longer term thought exercise to think about in terms of that longer term funding and how are these farmers going to be like maintaining these long term. So maybe just an interesting thought exercise. I don't know.
It's great to hear that, you know, the farmers aren't getting penalized in that particular case for doing good for the land.
Totally. Sometimes I don't know, sometimes policies that are put in place or have these kind of unintended consequences when you're just looking at one isolated impact. So, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Are there any other questions for this group or any of the presenters? I think we had a question for Tara, real quick, of if the projects that you guys implemented were in Ojai Valley specifically, or if they had ventured into all over Ventura County.
Yeah, so typically more of our garden projects right now are in Ojai Valley, just because I have a stronger connection with the schools here. And typically we're doing like school greening type projects. But we're starting to have a little bit more of a connection with the Oxnard Rio School District. So we're potentially going to be having a garden project happening at Oxnard High School, we already kind of started that project with kind of a sheet mulching project to get rid of some of the grass layer, and then we'll be adding in some pollinator plants there as well. But yeah, we're just kind of like starting at a smaller scale elsewhere just because I don't have those connections yet. But if you guys have any locations that are available in Thousand Oaks or Oxnard or Ventura, those are locations that I'm looking for some of these projects.
Great. There was also, yes, one of the questions from Fran, have you tried raptor poles to deal with your gopher problems?
Yeah, so I've tried raptor perches, and it didn't necessarily work as well as I wanted it to. We put those more next to a different part of campus that was having gopher problems, like over by their football stadium underneath all the seating. The gophers actually ate under the seating and everything fell into the holes. So we added raptor perches over there, and it didn't necessarily help too much. But yeah, we have raptor perches and barn owl boxes. I'm kind of open to all suggestions, like even if it's like putting spices over the drip irrigation, just so that kind of like stops them from chewing on it. Because there's so many. Yeah.
Vinegar and cayenne pepper.
I thought I've heard of the cayenne pepper before, and I'm considering it. I'm just like, maybe I'll just get a whole bunch and the kids will just sprinkle it all over the pipe.
All right, cool. So if there are no other questions for the presenters, I'll pass it on over to Jia, and she'll kind of talk to you guys about the Western Monarch count for this year.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for everybody for participating in our MRAC meeting and listening to all you guys' presentations. It's amazing, and all the hard work that everybody is doing out there for our pollinators. I'm just going to give a little update on our Western Monarch count. So far, Xerxes has reported that our early report has been 5,000 monarchs observed so far throughout our overwintering sites. It's a little behind our early season from last year, which was 7,601 butterflies, but they're still coming through. So hopefully our mid-season count will start to get a little bit higher. Some really good sites so far that they've been seeing a lot of butterflies is the Natural Bridges in Santa Cruz, which has 1,100 monarchs so far. The Lighthouse Field is also climbing quickly. They've doubled in the last 2 weeks to up to 979. And let's see, of course, Pismo State Beach was like where all usually they are. It's actually really only up to 63 right now. So hopefully they will get there. We are, like I said, we're still in the early season count. The weather is still kind of warm right now. So hopefully as we get into our colder months, the monarchs will come towards us. If you guys are interested in becoming a volunteer to count for the monarchs, please visit the westernmonarchcount.org. You can sign up as a volunteer. You can get contact with your coordinator in your region, and you can do a training and get all this free swag if you're out and about with us. To do that, the counting, the mid-season count starts November 15th and it goes through December 7th. And then if you are available, you can also do the late season count, which is December 27th through January 11th. We would just love to have volunteers to come out and be part of this great community science. And yeah, I think that's all I have on ours. We did do a count. I do want to say, we did do a counting at one of our sites, and we had a really good number. We saw 103 monarchs, so they're coming here, and hopefully there'll be more in the future.
And if you have further questions about the Western Monarch count, Jia is actually one of the co-coordinators for Ventura County, so you can always reach out to her with any questions you have as well. We can put her email in the chat as well. All right, so I will kind of open up the floor to anyone if they have any questions, comments, concerns about any monarch or pollinator related things. I see Chris's hand is up. Chris, if you want to take the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. I'm in the car, but I'm going to do my best to make this into my office. I wanted to thank everybody for their presentations. They were really good. So I'm glad to hear that. I wanted to bring this up because this has been basically a big topic that's been going on pretty much for the last 4 years, and I've probably gotten involved with it in the last 6 to 8 months. And this is concerning the overwintering sites that are located in Ventura County. So we have 9 of them total, 8 of them that are under the city of Ventura jurisdiction, and 1 under the county, which is Harbor Boulevard. But I wanted to bring this up because, and here's a hypothetical for you. Say you're out at the Monarch, you're part of the Western Monarch count, and you're going out and you're counting monarchs. You finish your count, you're getting ready to leave, and a crew shows up and starts cutting down the trees. What do you do? And this has happened, and this is what's in question right now and how we're going to deal with this in the future. So the Ventura City 2025 general plan was just approved in the last month, and I worked with Xerces. I worked with a lot of local biologists, local nonprofits, including my own nonprofit, to get this message out to the city council that these sites need to be saved. They need to be recorded. They need to be in alignment with Xerces, have site numbers, and so they could recognize that these sites are designated overwintering sites. And I was surprised at how little knowledge they had. So as part of that, the good news is that we were able to convince them to incorporate a lot of the policies into the general plan once they approved it, and that went as far as recognizing monarch overwintering sites, things that are wildlife corridors and things like that. So that is actually a really positive thing I wanted to talk about. But and I put this information also in the chat, but we're looking at Vista Del Mar Northeast, and that is site 3139. That is in the coastal zone, and that is the one project that is on the front burner for KB Homes to destroy basically all the trees that are there to put up housing. So this is going to start coming about now within like the next 18 to 24 months, because KB Homes has not provided the environmental reports as they should have, and they've basically had 4 years to do it. They've just extended their MOA for another year, but in that time, KB Homes has to come up with this information. One stipulation is that they have to try to come up with a design that includes the existing heritage trees, the large trees that are there on Vista Del Mar, and include the overwintering site. This is going to be a big deal if KB Homes doesn't have a different design plan. If you look at the design rendering, there are no eucalyptus trees there. There are no cypress. There aren't anything. So this is a big deal. So I will bring this up at other meetings, MRAC meetings in the future, because this is a considerable site. This is 15 acres, and they basically want to scrape everything off the land right there and build these homes. So this is going to be a city council meeting agenda item. This is going to be something we're going to need public comment written to, and all the experts that are out there that have a say in this, these are the people that we need to hear from. Xerces and I have partnered, and they're helping me write letters, which I really appreciate, and it went a long way. But having more people from our community that are monarch advocates and experts is going to be critical in this, because otherwise they are going to take this site down. So that was kind of like my big statement. And if you have any other questions about this, you can contact me directly. I put my information in the chat. There's also, for Xerces, there's also on the westernmonarchcount.org, if you see damages to trees that are within the overwintering sites, designated overwintering sites, you can, there's a form you can fill out and send to them. And another thing I wanted to mention, as some of these trees are destroyed, monarch clusters may be moving. So if we see any new clusters that aren't within overwintering sites, you can report those to Xerces as well at wmc@xerces.org. That's going to be really important because year after year, if we start noticing these clusters, we want to contact Xerces and try to get them added as sites or preliminary monitoring, so future developments don't cut those trees down. So you can kind of see the whole full circle of what's going on. But I'm trying to be an advocate with this, but really like to have a lot of experts, and especially people on this committee to help out. But let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll give you some more information. But thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Chris. Do you have a comment on that as well?
Hi. I also want to say great presentations. This was a great meeting. It was a lot of really good information. And I just have a comment on Chris's sort of issues. I know several of us in the county have noticed, I've talked to some of the RCD biologists about what they're seeing with the damage, whether it be public works or proposed development that's happening to these sites. So one of the things that I would like to maybe discuss at the next meeting is potentially forming like a conservation subcommittee if RCD is open to it or this group is open to it. So for example, Audubon, the local Audubon group has like a conservation subcommittee that when projects are coming in that will impact like over like a colonial roost or something like that, they'll write in letters representing sort of bringing attention to the impacts to that. And so I'd just like to propose a discussion for that, for potentially getting those people that are interested in this group to sort of notify the others about projects that may be coming up that would impact particular pollinator sites or monarch sites. So just throwing that out there. I know it's RCD, you're in charge of this, but I think it might be a good thing because these sites are getting hammered here.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great idea. Thank you for that recommendation, Abby. And I can send out something to the overall MRAC group and kind of gauge the interest on that and see if we have people who would want to be a part of a committee like that. And we can definitely talk about it at the next committee meeting that will be next spring in 2026. So I will send something out to kind of gauge that interest. Yvette, did you have something that you wanted to add as well?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Chris and I'm sorry, I didn't catch the other person's name, but yeah, just wanted to call out for people to write into the city and give their opinions about the development at Vista Del Mar. From my understanding, as the consultant, these overwintering sites aren't really protected. There's not really robust, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. They're not super robust laws to protect these sites, so it is really up to us to let the city know that we want these sites protected. They're the ones approving these development sites, and they can write stipulations that we would like, or they can. So yeah, just if everybody on this call could take a moment to send a message, but also I really like that idea of making a subcommittee where we can all put our thoughts and brains together and energy together to help I think one of the only reasons that Elwood and some of the sites in Santa Barbara exist, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but is because the people that live there have made a fuss about saving monarchs, and therefore the city is protecting them. So it is really up to us. So
Great, thank you. Sorry, did I cut you off there?
Nope, that's it. I just wanted to make it short, and then yeah, if any, just to continue on with the program. And thanks for all the work that you guys are doing.
Okay, perfect. Andrea, did you have a comment on that?
My comment is actually on offering a space for events or fundraisers. I live in Ojai, right next to the Montessori School on Baldwin Road, and I have an incredible studio. It's 2,400 square feet, so it can fit, I think I've had as many as 200 people in it. That's very tight, but and then this long string harp that I've created, Sonic Butterfly. And what I'd just like to do is offer to these different organizations, you're all doing such incredible work. If you're ever looking for a space to do a fundraiser, you know, my goal is to offer a space. I can play my instrument, but this is really just my way of giving back to the monarchs. The monarchs whispered in my ear to create this instrument about 12, 13 years ago, and now it is my goal to give back, and all of you are doing the work, and it's extraordinary. I'm so grateful to have listened to everything that you're doing. And if you're looking for a space to hold some type of event or fundraiser, it would be my honor to help you to make that happen.
Great, thank you so much, Andrea. And maybe at the next meeting, we can also discuss if the subcommittee wanted to be meeting in person or just online, so we can kind of talk about that at the next one. And we can schedule some time at the next meeting for a discussion on the subcommittee. I will be sending out information on that, and look for further information on our next committee or meeting in 2026. I did have a question for either Abby or Chris or anyone who is keeping up with the KB development. If you guys know when that environmental review comment period opens, or if it has opened, is there a way that we can put those comments into that specific development?
Can Chris maybe can answer this more, but even when there's not a comment period, like we can still send emails. So I highly encourage that people send emails, but there is no environmental review open right now, and there's a lot of unknowns. But Chris, do you want to chime in?
I was just going to say it's very early, but it is the environmental documents that have been requested by the city have not been given by KB Homes, number one, and there hasn't been the full analysis done, but and Abby may be able to put more insight into this. But the thing is, these meetings are happening all the time. You can show up to a city council meeting at any month with it not being on the agenda and make a public comment, but you can also send in your emails at the same time. City clerk at cityofventura.ca.gov. You can send in your emails. That's part of public record. But you can come to these meetings. I go to these meetings all the time. Even if it's not on the agenda, it's the public comment, and then I just bring this up so I can look every one of those council members in the face and see if they're listening and they want to protect these trees and not just take it down for development. They say they are environmentally friendly. They want to save wildlife and add all these wildlife corridors and protect critical habitat. When push comes to shove, we have to see that they actually do it.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that information. If there's anything else anyone wants to discuss, we can do that. We have a little bit of extra time, but if not, we'll go ahead and end this meeting a little early and give you all 13 minutes back of your afternoon. So if there's anything else. All right, doesn't seem like it. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you all in 2026 for the next MRAC meeting. And thank you to all of our presenters that spoke today about all their amazing work. So have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.